Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings here on Now TV. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I'm just thrilled that you're with me so that we can continue together, pardon me, uh, our examination of the challenge of Christ. And here we are in June already. Half of the year is almost over. Incredible. Okay. Well, the challenge of Christ, very simply stated, of course, is found in John chapter 10, 37 and following, in which Jesus, and you have to understand this, folks, this is critical to appreciate the setting, the context of what Jesus said. He is in the midst of a hostile Jewish crowd. They've gathered around him to try to find fault with him. Repeatedly throughout the Gospel of John, Jesus challenged his audience. John chapter 8, which of you finds fault with me? Now look, it's kind of like in the story of the woman caught in the act of adultery. And here the pompous, self-righteous Jews gathered around him, the Pharisees, and said, what should we do with this woman? The law, demands that this woman is killed. Funny that they didn't have the guy there. But nonetheless, and Jesus just kind of bends down and he starts scrolling in the dust and everything. And finally he says, let the one who is among you without any sin whatsoever throw the first stone. That was really, really challenging. Now, was Jesus condoning sin? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, he told the woman, when all of her accusers just, they kind of slowly drifted away one by one, and no one was left to accuse her. And he says, woman, where are your accusers? And he tells her, go and sin no more. In other words, don't do this anymore. Get your act together. Live a life of morality and purity. So this is not, as so many, unfortunately, down through the centuries have said, well, see, Jesus takes us where we are. He doesn't condemn anything that we do. After all, Jesus is going to save anybody and everyone, no matter what their sin. No, that's obviously false. But the point of it is that Jesus was very familiar that the people around him wanted to accuse him. They had caught this woman red-handed, as it were. And Jesus acknowledged it. He never denied her sin. But when it came to himself, he said, which of you finds fault with me? Now, that's powerful. So when, and that's John chapter 8, so when in chapter 10, Jesus, in front of another extremely hostile audience, says, if I do not do the works that my Father has given me, do not believe me. Folks, we've been examining this for a good long while now. I have shown you that the challenge of Christ is an extremely unique challenge. No other religion is so historically based as Christianity other than Judaism. Hinduism is not, Buddhism is not, Islam is not. No other religion issues the same kind of challenge. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, ladies and gentlemen, because the skeptics, the atheists, the agnostics, the Jews, the Muslims, and the unbelievers say, aha, see, okay, Jesus issued a challenge. I can prove to you, I've been watching on YouTube lately a lot of videos of interaction between some Christian believers and Muslims. And I don't know, I've forgotten the name of this guy, but he knows Arabic. He knows Islamism inside and out. And he is turning these Muslim unbelievers, challengers to Christ, inside out, showing them that, look, when Muslims say Christianity has problems, when the leaders of Islam try to point the finger and say Jesus didn't keep his word, he is showing Islam has multitudinous problems that the leaders of Islam, both historically and in modern day, are not confronting. Now, it's interesting to me that so far he hasn't been confronted with the so-called failure of Jesus to come back in the first century as he claimed he was going to do. I can't wait. I cannot wait to see how he will answer any Muslim that confronts him with that challenge of Christ. Now, I know that Muslims believe this is a serious problem, fatal to Christianity. So to be honest about it, pardon me, I'm rather stunned that none of them have ever said, okay, here's a challenge for your Jesus. Here's what he said. He said he was going to come back in the glory of the Father with his angels and judge every man according to his works. And he said it was going to happen before all those people died. Everyone knows that he did not do it. Therefore, he failed. What is this guy going to do? Well, I've been sharing with you from 2 Peter chapter 3, which is one of those major texts that the enemies of Christ point to, and they say, here is proof positive. Jesus failed his own challenge because he said it's going to come to pass in the last days. All of these things are going to be fulfilled. And more specifically, he said it was going to happen in his generation. Matthew 24, 29 to 34. Matthew 16, 27, 28. Matthew 10, 22 and 23. Speaking to living, breathing human beings, telling them to go preach throughout the cities of Israel, warning them that they're going to be persecuted from city to city. He said, you will not have gone, will not have fled through all the cities of Israel until the Son of Man has come. Well, number one, that puts his coming in the lifetime of those apostles. That's inescapable. It's undeniable. Secondly, he was going to come as the Son of Man. Well, guess what, folks? The coming of the Son of Man is confined, according to Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14, to the days of the Roman Empire. Well, that agrees perfectly with Jesus saying, some standing here shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming. Okay? Because he was living in the days of the Roman Empire. He was born in the days of the Roman Empire. Luke chapter 2, 1 and following, in the days of Caesar Augustus, a decree went out that all the world should be taxed. So Joseph and Mary travel in order to be registered in the census. So the point being, here is the challenge of Christ. And that's to be fulfilled in the last days. Now again, I've been focused on 2 Peter chapter 3 because the unbelievers go there and they say, look, you got to face the facts here. Peter said that in the last days, the scoffers are going to come saying, where is the promise of his parousia? His coming. Pardon me. For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were since the beginning of creation. So the scoffers Peter said the scoffers are going to come in the last days. Well, I've spent a couple of weeks sharing with you that Peter was reminding his audience of what the Old Testament prophets foretold about the scoffers. The scoffers would come in the day, in the time, in other words, in the generation in which God would lay the foundation stone, the tried cornerstone for the Messianic temple. Well, the New Testament writers, Peter among them, 1 Peter chapter 2, 4 and following, they are emphatic in teaching that Jesus Christ is that chief cornerstone that was laid. It was rejected of the builders, but became the chief cornerstone, and the Messianic temple was under construction in the first century. So what does that do for us? It identifies the first century as the last days, in which the scoffers would come denying the reality of the chief cornerstone, and yet they were warned, "Beware, you scoffers, for I have seen a work. I have seen," the prophet said, "a destruction of the whole earth." And the word earth there is gi, meaning land. That's in the Greek, of course, the Septuagint. So here is Isaiah foretelling the coming of scoffers who are going to deny the work of Jesus Christ as the chief cornerstone. They are being warned that their scoffing would lead to their destruction in the day of the Lord, as in Parousia and Gibeah, which were not end of time comings of the Lord. And then, since Isaiah is talking about Jesus' generation, the time when the scoffers would deny that the foundation stone, we come to the New Testament, and what do we find with Paul? We find that Paul in Acts chapter 13 is preaching the gospel in the synagogue. And the Jews seem to be unbelieving. The Gentiles are accepting the message, but Paul turns to his Jewish audience and he says, "Beware, you scoffers." And he quotes from Habakkuk chapter 1. And the context of Habakkuk is the impending destruction of Jerusalem at the hand of the Babylonians. And there were scoffers who were denying that. Jeremiah chapter 6, Jeremiah chapter 7. Those who were saying, "Peace, peace," when there is no peace. And God said, "I'm bringing judgment on this people and upon this city." And the scoffers said, No, everything's cool. No danger. Habakkuk warned them and said, "Behold and beware, you scoffers, for behold, I'm going to work a work in your days that no one would believe, even if man told it." God is saying this is going to be a strange work to you, but it's a work of destruction, not deliverance. And that's what Isaiah 28 and Isaiah 29 both foretold when the Lord said, "I'm going to do a marvelous work and a wonder in your days, O Israel." What was that marvelous work? The laying of the foundation stone and the impending destruction in the day of the Lord. The destruction of Israel in the day of the Lord. You know, for a discussion, by the way, of this day of the Lord at Gibeah and Gibeon, let me recommend that you go to my website and get a copy of my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. In this book, I go to Isaiah chapter 28, and I take note of the fact that this day of the Lord, of the last days, and the last days scoffers, because after all, remember, that's what Peter is quoting and quoting from in 2 Peter chapter 3. So, to put this as simply as possible, okay, the day of the Lord of 2 Peter chapter 3 would be a day of the Lord as foretold in Isaiah chapter 28. The day of the Lord of Isaiah chapter 28 would be the day of the Lord as in the day of Parousia, as in the day of Gibeah. Okay? But the day of the Lord as in the day of Parousia, as in the day of Gibeah, was not an earth-burning, time-ending event. They were days of judgment, to be sure, but those events were for the deliverance of Israel. 2 Chronicles chapter 14 is one of those instances in which, again, God delivered Israel from their enemies. But remember, in Isaiah chapter 29, God said, I'm going to do a marvelous work and a wonder. It's going to be a strange work. I'm going to come as I did at that time, but this time it will not be for deliverance, it will be for destruction. This is what Peter is drawing from in 2 Peter chapter 3. And folks, you just got to catch the power of this. And let me pick up on this one more time. I'm going to develop this extensively later on. But since I've touched on the coming of the Lord as at Parousia, as at Gibeah, okay? And again, if you go to my website and you order a copy of my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. By the way, this is, to my knowledge, this is the only full preterist commentary on 2 Peter chapter 3 that's ever been produced. Now look, commentators after commentator after commentator down through the centuries have commented on 2 Peter 3, showing that it's not about the end of time, but rather the judgment of Israel in AD 70. But this is the only full-length commentary on 2 Peter chapter 3 that I am currently aware of. If you know of one, let me know. Okay? So, go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Go to the store, order the book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. Send me a note that says you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. That's going to save you $7.50. Okay? Do that. You're going to love this book. It'll challenge you. I guarantee it'll challenge you, but you'll be glad of it. Okay, so I want to introduce to you that just like the Lord said, as at Parousia, as at Gibeah, I'm going to come. Not in salvation, but in judgment of the wicked. Now, that doesn't mean there would be no salvation for the righteous remnant. It's just that the focus is the judgment of the wicked in these cases. Okay. Everyone agrees that the day of the Lord in 2 Peter chapter 3, the day of the Lord in the last days. Now, what do scoffers do? What do the skeptics do? What do the unbelievers do when they talk about the challenge of Christ? They say, oh, all you Christians, you say we're living in the last days, but Christ hasn't come. And you Christians have been saying that in the last days, and the last days supposedly began on the day of Pentecost. Well, guess what? Peter said the day of the Lord would come in the last days. But the last days have been going on for 2,000 years now. And so the skeptics go, you Christians have a problem. Just the other day on Facebook, one of those skeptics, not an atheist, not an agnostic, but simply a person who denies full preterism, said, you see, Preston, the last days begin at the cross, and they will continue until the end of the Messianic age. Now, look, I've got to tell this because this is so illustrative of the desperation of those who oppose covenant eschatology. This guy says, well, see, part of your problem, Preston, is You use terms that are not found in the Bible. You talk about the Mosaic age, you talk about the Old Covenant age, you talk about the Christian age. Those are not terms found in the Bible, so your entire theology is wrong because you use words and terms and phrases that are not in the Bible. So what does he do? Well, he says the last days endure until the end of the Messianic age. So over and over and over and over again, I have challenged him, show me the term Messianic age in the Bible. Total silence. Not a key stroke. So here's a guy who condemns me for using the term Old Covenant age, Mosaic age, Christian age, because the term's not found in the Bible. But he uses the term Messianic age, which is not found in the Bible. Do you see the desperation here? Do you see the total hypocrisy here? Okay, so here's the point. 2 Peter chapter 3 foretold the day of the Lord in the last days, at the end of the last days. And again, I'm going to have a whole lot more to say about this later on. Some of this territory I've covered before, never hurts to repeat it, because we've got a ton of new subscribers. We've got a ton of new viewers. And by the way, thank you so much. But here's my argument. In 2 Peter chapter 3, Peter was predicting the coming of the new heaven and new earth as foretold in the Old Testament. I don't know of anybody that denies that, except a few postmillennialists who see a train coming with its lights flashing and its horn blaring, and it's coming right straight for them if they admit that. So, the coming of the Lord in the last days of 2 Peter chapter 3 would be the day of the Lord to bring in the new heaven and new earth as foretold in the Old Testament. Well, Isaiah chapter 65, 66 foretold the coming of the Lord in the last days to bring in the new heaven and new earth. But catch the power of this. The day of the Lord foretold by Isaiah 65 to 66 is the day of the Lord foretold by Isaiah 64, verses 1 and following. Now, I'm going to turn all the way back there. I do not want to misquote this. I want you to catch the power of this directly from a reading of it. Now, remember, and again, I don't know of any commentaries that deny the connection between the coming of the Lord of Isaiah 64 and the coming of the Lord of Isaiah 65 through 66. Everyone agrees it's the same, all right? So Isaiah chapter 64. Isaiah and Israel is depicted as praying unto the Lord. And I've got to hurry here. Oh, that you, that's Yahweh, oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down. Hey, that sounds like 2 Peter 3, doesn't it? Oh, that the mountains might quake at your presence. Now, the word presence here, in the Septuagint, the Greek of the Old Testament, is prosopon. It means face. It means presence. It literally means nose. Since it's translated presence, it's a direct corollary with the Greek word parousia, which means presence. So guess what? Isaiah 64 is, oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down, that the mountains might quake at your presence. We could justifiably render that at your parousia. As fire kindles the brushwood, as fire causes water to boil, to make your name known to your adversaries, that the nations may tremble at your presence. Okay, so what is Isaiah praying for? Number one, the coming of the Lord. Number two, the parousia, the presence of the Lord, when he would come down. Yeah, that's the parousia. And what would happen? The mountains might quake at your presence as fire kindles the brushwood, as fire causes water to boil. Destruction of the earth. That's 2 Peter chapter 3, right? The earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up. So here's Isaiah praying for the day of the Lord to bring in a new heaven and new earth. Everybody agrees with that. Are you following me? Are you paying really, really, really close attention here? Now remember, the scoffers were denying that coming. The scoffers would appear in the last days denying this coming right here. But Israel is praying, Lord, come down, shake the heavens, shake the earth, like fire kindles the brushwood, to make your name known among the nations, or specifically among your adversaries, that the nations may tremble at your presence. Now watch this. This is where it gets critical. When you did, that's past tense, right? When you did awesome things for which we did not look, you came down. The mountains quake at your presence. For from old they have not heard, nor perceived by ear, nor has the eye seen a God besides you, who acts in behalf of the one who waits for him. Isaiah, what are you talking about? Isaiah says, for Israel, Lord, you've got to come and you've got to deliver us. Why? Well, Isaiah 64 recounts it. At the time that this prayer was being uttered, Israel would be in captivity. Israel would be oppressed. Israel is praying for deliverance. Isaiah acknowledges their sin, all in the last days, but says the Lord, praise the Lord. Lord, come, come. Lord, come as you came in the past. Well, folks, if God had never literally, visibly, bodily come out of heaven in the past, and Isaiah and Israel is praying for him to come as he had come, they're not praying for him to come literally, visibly, and bodily. And we're out of time. See you next week.